Hi guys, I'm Howler Mouse. I want to talk about some comics. Kind of left Twitter and around my birthday there and had a ton of notifications. We're talking way up high in the double digits. Kind of surprised at some of the people that were tagging me in things and had a few questions. So right off the bat, let me get those out of the way because Twitter is off my phone. I just checked it today for the hell of it and stuff. I've been gone probably like over close to 2 weeks or something. But yes, I have shot videos that haven't been uploaded because of basically I was sick in them. I was sick from February 17th up until sometime in the middle of last week. It was horrible. Still went to work, didn't miss anything. Shot a few videos, so there's some secret Howler Mouse videos on this very computer that I'm on there that'll never be uploaded. Just because of my presentation execution, not because of the subject matter. So thanks for asking. I'm back. Another thing that this video is going to kind of go at, probably whatever title I picked has already told you. But I just recently had a birthday, and 40 years of collecting. This year will make 40 years of collecting, give or take a few months or something, right? And I could have took the easy way out and rehashed some old videos and some old stories. I've got 7 years worth on here. And, over the years, it kind of amazed me about the collecting is when I started out, didn't really have anybody to talk to about it. I sit there and would go through my uncle and stepdad's books. I still have quite a few and stuff. And, just kind of absorb this stuff. Then I go outside. I also had Saturday morning cartoons. We had Superman the movie coming on. I saw the dawn of Star Wars, Flash Gordon, all the stuff that just kind of fed the imagination and stuff. And I always kind of grew with this. And the whole time I always knew there was this stigma on comics, If you've watched my videos over the years, you know what some of these are. It'll be really easy to go through and talk about all these comics again with the bad lighting I have because it's really late at night and I'm doing the best I can. And how or I could have pulled out some more of the books that I find that are my favorites or highly underrated and may not be worth a lot of money and stuff like that. But one of the things that amazed me with collectors and collecting and the stories is how when you were growing up and you didn't have the internet, this town I went in did not have a comic book shop. You had a few places you can buy them. And I still have the very first comic I bought in '79 with my money and stuff and things like that, is how you would kind of scan around for comics. When I was in kindergarten, I remember you'd get on the bus and you sat by grade, little kids up front, all the way to 5th grade in the back. I remember dead set in the middle of the bus, kind of looking back and dying to go back there and kind of looking at the bus driver, knowing this wasn't going to happen. I pussed out, But I remember this kid had a stack of comic books, and they looked like the DC Dollar books. I'd read enough by this time to already kind of start recognizing the book. And I remember, I'll never forget it, he held up a book, and I want to say it was an Adventure Comics. I don't know, but he had a picture of Hawkman sitting there with his black hair blowing in the wind and a cloud around him, and he's holding his helmet, and he's sitting there and he's like waving or looking at the pilot of this plane. And I was just sort of like, what is that? And it's one of the things that's always haunted me since a young kid, probably fed my, collecting. I always kind of wanted to find that book. But it was just a pin up in a book. I should have went and talked to the kid. And then not long after that, amazingly enough, after school let out, we went to Raven Flea Market. It was this little town that's nothing, but at the time, and it was like half the town, even across the street was a flea market. Everybody went there. I remember walking through there, and somebody had me by the hand, kind of dragging me, because when I turned around, I looked down and I saw this cardboard box, and it had 25 cents on it, and the cardboard box looked big enough to where it could have been like a dryer or something came in it, and they cut it in half, to lower it. And I remember seeing the All-Star Comics logo and stuff, and I remember the books kind of being a little bit bigger, and I was trying to look at them, I was getting dragged away, and I was like, wanting to look at this, and it just wasn't happening. I now know those were Golden Age comics I could have got for $0.25 a piece, that when I was that little, that young. And over the years, you'd go places and you'd be able to sniff out comics. It became second nature for me to find these little Whitman 3-packs or find a little box in the back that had, comics in it and stuff like that. And it had a $5 allowance, so I'd be able to get them and stuff. And things like that. And every now and then, the stepdad or something would come in with some comics, and I had all his Silver Age and Bronze Age comics still there and stuff, and getting my own collection up. But when I was 16, made it to a comic book shop, a real comic book shop for the first time. And then, not long after that, I ended up working at Hardee's, and we had a comic book shop open up in the town I was in. I ended up working there because I painted the sign for the place. But the guy who owned it had a real job at a community college. He was some kind of accountant, CEO, I don't know what it was. But he's also like dodging his wife and playing Battletech, I think, all the time. And his wife would come in and just be all like trying to pump me for information about what he's doing. I didn't know. I was trying to run this shop from like 4 o'clock till 9 o'clock, and then I had a shift. I was the outside guy at Hardee's from 3 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. So I was practically running this comic book shop because he was dodging the wife and playing his games and all this stuff. And I would do things like an art contest every now and then, give out books, have people draw things. It was around, and then I was pretty much running the place when we had the death of Superman in the 90s, to give you some time frame here. But where the guy was kind of not giving me a full paycheck and trying to get me to work just for comic books and stuff like that, I would take a few shortcuts here and there. Like my brother would come in with his big pull list all piled up, and I'd give him about every third comic for free that he bought and stuff, and little things like that. Passive aggressive. Enough times come by, I don't care. That shut down, amazingly enough. I joined the military. I come out. There's another comic book shop. And that place stayed for like about 2 years, and that place was magnificent. You could read the comics in there. I asked the guy. He was a teacher in his real life, and this was just a dream of his to have a comic book shop, and there'd be his friends in there. And I asked him about, you don't mind people reading books? And he was just sort of like, no, it's like a commercial to get them to, I don't want people to waste their money on things they don't like. I want them to come back and get the stuff they do want. Gives him a little direction on how to order and stuff. He ended up shutting it down because it was taking too much time from his teaching job, which was his passion. And he and I have gone to comic book shops with his group of friends, my group of friends also, over the years. And then over the years, the comic book conventions I was older, I was able to make it to these comic book conventions. And what always amazed me was the conversations that would come up that only collectors would do. You do this hobby and you read on your own, even as a little kid for some of us and stuff like that. And you can read a comic in 1980, and somebody can find that book in 1995 or now, and you have the same experience reading that story. And after people reading all these books and stuff, it always amazed me how in all those places growing up, on the bus, in the cafeteria, in the comic book shops as I got older, into the conventions, you would always hear the same conversations, and all these people from all over, coming to the same conclusions. And that's what I want to talk about, is basically the mini death of Marvel Comics. Because in a video I shot not too long ago, Marvel has said they're going to drop, or it's a rumor that Marvel's going to come back to a more familiar Marvel universe, thus dropping all the SJW stuff in the books that's not selling, and the criticism and the alienation of fans. But this is the first time that some of the feedback I've gotten is that people really aren't going back, and they will only go back if they get rid of Dan Slott, Bendis, Axel Alonso. People seem to be going back and forth with Mark Waid and stuff. And when they said that, this was one of the first times that these conversations were going on. Maybe it's the internet or something, that I didn't come to that conclusion. I just wasn't going back. But when they said if those people would be gone after these people have pointed fingers, and we know what they've done, I'm like, I'd go back if they left, So that's the first time where I've had feelings like that. So it's pretty serious. So the many deaths of Marvel Comics. Of course, they have been publishing Marvel Comics since '61, and they were another company before that. Got to move this video along. I've been talking too long already. But what always amazed me is that when I started hearing these conversations over the years from collectors who were there at the Silver Age, and when I first got the internet and found these message boards, and I found this group of people more or less led by a guy named Commander Benson, and you can Google him. He does articles and stuff and everything like that. Their whole idea of comics ended with the Silver Age. They only collected Silver Age books, and then they even got into conversations about when did the Silver Age really end. They don't say it was Gwen Stacy. They said it was when Snapper Carr turned his back on and betrayed the Justice League. I think Denny O'Neil wrote that. I mean, they really get into it. Then they got into conversations about when did the Silver Age really begin, And these guys knew their stuff. They sit there and they just have trivia contests with each other, going really in depth with anything Silver Age. It was just amazing stuff to watch online. But then you had the people who were kind of like me. It was, you know, the books and the Marvel Universe and different generation there and stuff. And the Marvel Universe, when it started, brought in continuity to comics. Okay, it was the first time you kind of saw something that whatever happened in this book will affect that book. And people kind of looked at it as like, you know, they loved it. This is what they wanted. They were dedicated to buying these books. If something happened over here, oh, I know what they're talking about. I'll go get this book over here. And that perpetuated throughout the entire 60s. Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, Stan Lee, you know, Don Heck. They brought in Barry Windsor Smith. Roy Thomas popped up and stuff. But it was the way that Kirby was getting treated behind the scenes that some people woke up. And I think Roy Thomas was the big one. And they stopped bringing in new characters and to a certain extent ideas. They didn't want to become Kirby, who jumped to DC. So right there, that's the first time that a lot of collectors kind of got the idea that the death of the real Marvel was, you know, Jack Kirby jumping ship, leaving the Fantastic Four. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. For some people, their Marvel was dead. But then I started getting the idea, and I started hearing other people talk about it, which amazed me. And the first time I ever saw it really printed, somebody else talking about it, was an interview with Kurt Busiek, who does Astro City, and it may have been in an Astro City interview where he was bringing the book back through Vertigo. But he didn't. He got asked about the changes at Marvel, and he said, well, his Marvel Universe died a long time ago. He's had time to accept it. And this right here was where I'd had these conversations or heard these conversations, and all the collectors that I'd ran across over the years from the 80s up until like maybe the early 2000s, where they were talking about, you know, Marvel had already kind of changed and it wasn't the same. And we all came up with the same books, and Kurt Busiek had it on his list. The first 200 issues of the Avengers. Was it the first 103 issues of Fantastic Four, Lee and Kirby, you know, all the way up to what's considered the death of the Silver Age. Around the same time, you know, the death of Gwen Stacy. Everything from those books back with particular titles, even though it was in different years, each book sort of died a Marvel death of what they considered the real Marvel. Fascinating. We all came up with the same books, the same runs, everything like that, and it was from reading the books and the collectors and how they had changed or had the illusion of change. There's a whole other deal with that. And then Roger Stern told John Byrne, apparently they had a discussion, that he felt like the true Marvel died when a book called Marvel Team Up came out. Because they changed Spidey. Spidey was the loner in something special for the readers and stuff. Even though he was part of the Marvel Universe, Spider-Man was a very special to people. And by making this unreal concept that could never really happen, it's like Marvel didn't really care if things were plausible. It's supposed to be, you know, still comic books. But, you know, the world outside your window, Spider-Man's a loner. Then all of a sudden, you know, to cash in a little bit in the early 70s, Spider-Man meets a new hero every month. And that just blew some minds. And Roger Stern actually ends up coming up with being participating in a part of what some people consider the death of the real Marvel Universe. So as years go by, there's a lot of stuff that's going on behind the scenes, and the creators started talking like Roger Stern did with John Byrne about what's going on. People were leaving, things came on, and then Jim Shooter came on, and Jim Shooter became editor-in-chief, and he was big on continuity. And Jim Shooter had been trained by the old school editors and stuff from in his teens. He started writing comics when he was 13 or 14 and got brought in, and he learned under the people that came in with suits and ties from the 50s that it didn't get this hippie movement and didn't understand what Marvel Comics were doing, but he learned that people work and you don't exactly have to treat them very nice, you know. So he comes in and he's big on continuity, and Marvel just had this big wave of success with the X-Men books, Death of Phoenix, the Iron Man Demon in a Bottle book. You'd go to him and he'd want to hear the story, and he was big on continuity and stuff like that. And a lot of people kind of consider, and people stayed dead. That's the thing that's leading up to this. People in retrospect, after Shooter left, consider Shooter leaving being the death of the Marvel Universe. Because all of a sudden it was like people just kind of went nuts with the books. Death didn't mean anything. Up until, you know, Jean Grey coming back and Elektra coming back, You probably had like maybe 6 or 7 characters that came back, like Wonder Man, Xavier was brought back. It was very small. And now we're used to characters dying and we just sit there and hold our breath. You can actually literally hold your breath until a character comes back, when death became meaningless. And Frank Miller had to talk Jim Shooter into letting him kill Electro. One of their just amazing, had an amazing fan base, and the Daredevil book was going on. But he said that if Jean Grey was ever to come back, it better be a hell of a story because she was going to stay dead. So Jean Grey's death meant something. It made the Marvel, that whole Claremont, John Byrne run, was very sacred to a lot of people. And then all of a sudden, they bring Jean Grey back. And Jim Shooter always said that you have to sell me on the story. Kurt Busiek came up with the idea of how to bring Jean Grey back. John Byrne and Roger Stern ended up fleshing it out, which led to X Factor #1. And some people consider this the death with Elektra coming back. Apparently she kind of escapes out, but a lot of people consider Jean Grey coming back as a death in the Marvel Universe, because that's when death meant nothing in the Marvel Universe. And after Jim Shooter got booted out, and he had all these ideas of seeing how the Marvel Universe was kind of dying, because fans were just wondering about the timeline. Is it 7 years that all this stuff is happening in the Marvel Universe, or is it 10? And people started having questions and stuff. There's this thing that they were having behind the scenes about these characters aren't changing; they're the illusion of changing. And somebody, I've heard it with Stan Lee, and I've heard it with some other people, were telling people, don't change your characters, just make it look like they're changing. So when Shooter left, they lost a bunch of writers. Louise Simonson eventually took off. Took her a little while. Steve Englehart. All these names that Chris Claremont ended up leaving, they all kind of started dropping like flies at the same time some people were coming back. And they just kind of blew up the stuff that Shooter did. But Shooter was coming up with ideas. He was big on continuity. That's where you had the new universe, where he was trying to, from the ground up. He wanted just to wipe out the Marvel Universe and reboot it. And everybody was just sort of like, that's crazy. He wanted to have it in modern times. Well, it may be crazy, but they ended up stealing his idea, and that's where you got your Ultimate Universe and your Ultimate Peter Parker. So you can give Bendis and Bagley, well, whoever came up with it, Bagley was just an artist, doing a job, but you can give Bendis all the credit in the world if you want, but it was really Shooter's idea to restart all of that. But anyway, they're saying that's when it came up, because all of a sudden, in 1990/91, I was a senior in high school, we had the Infinity Gauntlet come out, where they literally took half of the Marvel Universe and killed them and then brought them back. And that weighs a little bit heavy with all the things that were going on behind the scenes, all the questions fans were starting to have with these conversations and writing in and asking. And a lot of people consider 1991 to be the real death of the Marvel Universe. So, in retrospect, you've got things like classic runs ending, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Fantastic Four ending, Avengers, first 200 Avengers, or that's the real Marvel Universe, things like that. Death of Gwen Stacy, the startup of Marvel Team Up, Shooter leaving, and death becoming meaningless, and then that culminating in half the Marvel Universe being killed and brought back. All from fan retrospect, and there's actually been creators who have said things. There's a comic book I wished I got out, but it was called Fred Hembeck Destroys the Marvel Universe, which was comedy and satire. The rumor that I heard over the years is that it was supposed to be called Jim Shooter Kills the Marvel Universe, and they wouldn't let it go through. So even behind the scenes, the creators have leaked out, being fans themselves and being in the midst of it and stuff like that, how they feel the Marvel Universe died a long time ago. But the thing about it is in that last video I talked about how collecting comics with Marvel and DC and stuff is battered wife syndrome. You get a little smack, they say they'll change, they bring you back, and then they screw you over again with a revamp or a retcon. They keep going back and forth, but you reach that point where you get a new husband and you move on, you get away from this, you stop listening to their promises, and they have plenty of time to change, and that's where we're at with Marvel now, which is kind of gave me the idea to do this book. So will the fans come back if Marvel changes their ways and things like that? We'll just have to wait and see. But this is the first time that I honestly truly believe that there are a lot of people who are done and will not be back. So that's new. Out of 40 years of collecting, this is the first time I'm sort of like, what's going to happen? Alright guys, thanks a lot. Catch you later.